Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. Today is Tuesday, October 6th, 2020. I would like to call to order this special board meeting of the Othello School District Board of Directors draft reopening plan presentation. Want to thank everyone who was on the Zoom meeting tonight. Those of you watching on YouTube, we want to welcome you. Want to thank you. This is a very important topic, not just in our community, but I think as a nation, as a global society even. We have called this meeting, the board of directors gave a directive to the superintendent and his team to come up with a plan of reopening our district to some form of in-person educating. Very appreciative. I'd like to start off tonight by saying, on behalf of the board, to the district for their work, their effort in putting together this plan that they will be presenting tonight in such a timely fashion. Thank you, Dr. Hurst and the team, anybody involved in putting this together. Again, you guys continue to just rock it, to amaze us with your arduous work, your tenacity, your vigor in trying to get things figured out. Even when we throw you some curveballs at times, you guys have risen to the challenge, and proof of that is tonight. We are very much looking forward to the presentation of this plan, having an open dialogue, if necessary, any clarifying questions about this plan. Once again, thank you very much, community members. Thank you for your interest in listening tonight. I think this is, well, I know this is a step in the right direction. And I'm eager to hear the presentation in its totality and the great things that are up and coming for the Othello School District. So with that, Dr. Hurst, I will turn the meeting over to you.
Thank you very much, Board President, and thank you so much, Board of Directors. Just like to share, I appreciate the direction that you provided for us at last meeting. Want to share my appreciation with the entire Othello School District, especially those who have been working behind the scenes to putting together this draft plan for reopening and the quick turnaround time as well. With that, I'm going to turn it over to Pete Perez and members of the teaching and learning team to go through the presentation.
Good evening. Thank you, Dr. Hurst, for the introduction. We have prepared a series of slides and a discussion this evening. It is intended to be a discussion, so I'll make an effort every few slides to pause and certainly take questions from the board so we get clarity around where we're headed. Certainly the issue about preparing for a return to in-person instruction, it's an issue that's been percolating across the country, in our community, in our state. And what I think oftentimes what folks see as a potential solution for one group has consequences and can create problems for another group. And those problems in education are often defined as wicked problems. They're very difficult to solve, and frankly, sometimes they're impossible to ever solve fully. It really depends on your own bias, where you're sitting, how you're framing the problem and the solution. And when you make errors along the way, that has consequences for other folks. But really, it's our responsibility as leaders, certainly as district leaders, as teacher leaders, and as elected officials in your leadership role to think through these types of problems and work towards solutions. So our interest tonight is in presenting to you a series of solutions that we would ask you to consider. In the next slide, we're going to detail the outline and the outcomes for this evening's event. We really want to respond to the request from the school board that we heard a week or so ago. We want to share a review of our previous plans and the hard work that a lot of folks put in this summer to prepare for reopening in this unusual time in education. We want to share with you some revisions and refinement for our reopening plan based on the guidance from the Department of Health, the changes in community feedback, and what we've heard from the board. We also want to be really transparent and share some of the relevant challenges that we're all going to be asked to deal with. And then we're looking for a response. Thalia muted me at some point. So did you get most of that? Moving forward, next slide. So the request from the school board really was around a couple of items to accelerate the timeline to start in-person instruction. We presented a series of benchmarks and a plan for reopening that was approved by OSD and had been shared with the board. They also provide a detailed plan that outlines how the OSD will begin transitioning from online instruction to a blended or hybrid model. I think it's important at this moment, and perhaps others during the presentation, that we define the term hybrid. And the way that we're defining that term in our planning is that it gives families a choice. The online version, we're not giving families a choice, you're online. The blended version, our intention was not to give families choice. That was going to be our primary model. We're defining hybrid as a family has a choice on whether or not to come in person or to take their studies online. So I think it's important that we share that definition with the community. The other piece that they asked us to consider is that we would think about parent and or teacher choice with our online instructional model. So we're going to share some of our thinking around that, share some of the concerns. Really what you're going to hear tonight is our strategy. And we think of strategy in terms of a continuum. There's the vision and what are we thinking about? And then there's the small details. You will not hear the small details tonight. Many of those have been presented in the summer around the blended reopening plan. And we'll bring those documents back up and get that work going if the board decides that we're headed that direction. But here's our strategy for moving forward in a more accelerated format, partly because of community feedback and board requests, but also because the numbers are trending down in our community. And I think we should all celebrate and recognize that. In the next series of slides, you're gonna see some data. And that data was collected and developed by three important entities. OEA did a survey of their membership, and the first piece of data we're going to share is about teachers' interest in working remotely or in person. PSE did a very similar survey and asked a very similar question about working remotely or in person. I think it's important that folks understand that members who do not work with students every day and perhaps have been at work already or work in a circumstance that doesn't require them to be in close proximity with students daily. So they have their own survey. And then we're also going to share some data from a community survey that the school district put out about educational models and what the community perception is around those models. So I do want to pause there before we move on to the data and see if there are any questions from the board about the purpose of tonight's meeting, where we're headed, and sort of what we expect at the end.
Oh,
All right, I'm not seeing any.
there's a lot of people here.
Mike, could you put out a little message? There's a lot of mics on out there still.
Yes, I was about to do that. To the listening audience, if you would please be kind enough to mute your Zoom, mute your device, your apparatus. That way we can hear the person speaking. Wonders of technology and the ability to congregate and gather in this way, but along with it come these little details. So if everybody could be muted, otherwise you'll see that the host of the meeting is going to mute you. That is not done disrespectfully or anything like that, but it is to be able to hear the person speaking at this time.
All right, appreciate the pause there. Again, these are the questions and the community data that OEA, PSC, and the district put out. So I would ask Dalia to move to the next slide so we can begin sharing the initial data that came back. What this slide provides detail around is if you were given the choice of working remotely or in person, really what's your preference? The return rate or the return level for PSC was 130 of their members, and there were 256 that came in from OEA. Clarification that we did want to provide around the OEA data. It was an OEA survey. It was certainly developed and sent out by that organization, but they also included certificated teachers who are not a member of their organization. And that data is reflective of all the certified folks that responded to that survey, excluding administrators. But I did want to provide that clarification for the board and the community. So I guess at this slide, I do want to ask the board about the story that they see in the data, and or if they have any questions about what's shared here on this particular slide.
Pete, all these numbers were as of Friday of last week, correct?
Correct. PSE shared the numbers at that point. I believe their survey continues to be open, but these were at the point that it was, we were asked to make it available for the board. And so that was data at that point. I believe the OEA survey is closed. All right, the next slide provides an additional layer of data, and this is from the community perspective. We had, so because of the parity in questioning, you'll see all the data presented in just one slide. Next slide, please, Delia. And on this slide, you see that the N size continues to be the same. We are able to break down the data in the PSE and OEA strands by a little bit by job title in PSE and in OEA by building. We do have some other data that we are using internally, but the team is in a good position to respond as it was designed to do so from the start. So we're prepared to share what our response is around opening up. The next slide is again a review of the instructional models that were talked about in the summer and developed in the spring. Living in an online world, and certainly there have been mixed reviews around that work. Our initial work was around the blended model, and now we're ready to review and refine that work based on what we've learned over the last several weeks. There's been lots of information coming in from teachers and from families about their experience online. And every day our principals and our leadership teams at the school sites learn more and more about the most effective methods for our community. We're also in a position now to fully implement mitigation protocols with on-site staff and students. There was a lot of planning and talking about what that work would look like in a traditional or blended format. Again, people across the country are learning lessons about how to do that appropriately. And our staff have prepared for that, and we're ready to implement it in a reasonable timeline. And so we'll share that timeline with you here in just the next few slides. The next slide provides a reminder for the board and the community. We really presented in the summertime around remote learning, which is our current reality, what it would look like for asynchronous and synchronous instruction, and who it would be available for. We did a lot of prep work around the blended model before we were first forced to go to a remote experience. And really some of the new thinking would have to be around a hybrid model where we give folks choice, we give families choice about their sessions and what that might mean. One of the things that I think is important for the community to understand and for the board as well, when we give choice, when we create circumstances that are not as predictable, that's going to require an adjustment in the system. And we're going to have to think really carefully about a learning management system, most specifically for our K-6 students. If we have all our staff on site delivering a blended model of instruction, our commitment has been that we wouldn't ask them to also deliver very, very difficult. And it's not what's happening in schools in our region or in our state that we're aware of. So we are looking at learning management systems, platforms that we already own and have been implemented across the district. So we would look to leverage those if we decide that we're going to offer online components in a really broad sense. But until we have a direction and get moving that way, and have, I think Director Stevenson alluded to it earlier, we would have to have some additional data about who is coming back and which families are opting to stay home, and then balance our manpower to respond accordingly. Part of balancing that manpower may include a new learning management system for K-6 students. The next slide is, we're trying to look for some parity between what we presented to the board before about the least restrictive models. And so it's going to have a similar view, but it's very different content. What you see on the left-hand side is we can stay the course. This is what was presented in the summer. This was our plan that we continue moving forward with the plan that was approved by the board and by OSPI. We refine our implementation and we get more students access to high quality instruction online. And we commit to training our folks, getting better and better at what we've been asked to do. The way that we're describing that is that we know what to expect. It's what we've planned for. It's consistent. We stay the course and we move forward. In the center there, you'll see an accelerated move. And this is in response to Department of Health guidance. We're hearing from them that lessons are being learned and perhaps we can go faster than what was presented in the summertime. It also would call for a phased-in approach, which I think is going to be responsive to what we heard from K-6 staff and 7-12 staff, at least amongst the teachers. And it will also allow us some time for reflection and refinement between the transitions. So we'll share the phases with you in the next slide, the timing of that. We're looking at this as a more strategic approach, responsive to the board request, responsive to what we're hearing from our employees, and responsive to what we're hearing from some of the families in our community. So the accelerated model will be described. That's the one we'll focus on this evening. The hybrid model, which again was, that term was shared at the last board meeting. It's shared as an option that is available in some districts surrounding our community. It really requires an alignment of family and staff choices, which is what has been shared with us by leaders in those systems and other folks that are living that experience. And it is very difficult. It's different than what we're doing in Othello, but it has its challenges and they're having their own issues. It will also require K-8, an adjustment to our online instruction, which I shared a moment ago about the LMS system. And the board should be aware that cohorting of secondary students is a significant challenge. The Department of Health continues to require that you cohort and keep small groups of students together. We haven't found a system that has successfully figured that out in a secondary setting, 9-12. And so some of the rationale for our timeline, specifically to the secondary school, to DOHS and OHS, is reflected in that strong concern about cohorting secondary students. Key piece around hybrid, again, ties into family choice about their option that they desire. It is unpredictable. It will take us some time to gather that data. And it is a redesign. It's not what we had planned on, but it's certainly something that we could attack and address. There are lots of folks working in our schools now that are prepared to take on that work. But our recommendation this evening will focus on the accelerated model. So I think this is a particularly important slide. And so I want to pause for a moment to see if there are questions from the board about what we're going to share in the next several slides.
Can you talk a little bit more about the LMS system? If we were to do the hybrid, what exactly, in the last slide it talked about LMS, but can you define what LMS is? Yeah,
certainly. So there are a couple of options or a couple of approaches we could take related to that management system. We have some platforms in our district that our teachers are very familiar with that allow them to provide an online experience for our students already. Some of them have been around for years. So one model could be that, a student or a family would get a series of usernames and passwords. A teacher would be assigned to monitor their progress and make sure that they're participating in that sort of experience. But it would really be independent. It would really be the family and the student using our platforms and a little bit of contact with our employees, but much of their work would be independent. Another platform that we could consider is the purchase of a new structure. We have some experience, 9-12, in providing online curriculum and online experiences for students who want to take a course that perhaps we don't have trained teachers to offer. It's also primarily used for credit retrieval in our school district, but it's been living at the 9-12 level for years. There are options out there, K-6, that it would certainly be an investment in from the board and from the community in purchasing those licenses. And we would want to be really clear with folks that if we purchase that license and you decide to go that direction, there's a commitment that you would stay in that model. So there are some factors and some parameters around the experience that folks would have in an LMS system. The other thing that I think is important that the community understands is if you are having an experience right now online, K-6, that you are comfortable with and you don't want to send your student back, that may change if we decide to go with the blended approach or the hybrid model, because it would require that the teacher that you have now may in fact be reassigned. And if we bring all teachers back, the option to work one-on-one in that sort of setting, a more traditional classroom setting online, may go away. It will be much more independent. And that's going to require a lot of collaboration and planning with OEA that just hasn't occurred yet. We'll get some direction from the board tonight, but I think it's important that the community understands that online experience will change for K-6 students specifically. The next slide provides a sort of the first look for the community and the board around our reopening start dates and what we're going to suggest. It's again a phased-in approach. We're recommending that on or around November 1st, we start to really think about bringing kids back. I think we determined earlier that November 1st was actually a weekend, but that would be sort of the transition and the move towards on the 3rd, 4th, and 5th to bring students back. What's most important in this slide is why we made that determination. We are hearing from folks that teaching those early literacy skills is very difficult online. It's a really heavy lift for the students and the families and our teachers. And so the recommendations for the Department of Health when you consider opening schools are to really think about kids that are struggling online, struggling to find success. And the feedback from the system is that really lives at the K-3 level. It's a very, very difficult challenge. The Department of Health is also suggesting that you embed gaps in your phased reopening to allow some time to say, are we going to experience an outbreak at a school? Have we found success with our mitigation strategies and protocols? And if we are, and we learn some lessons, then move on to the next layer. So our suggestion is that right after Thanksgiving break, we bring back 4 through 6. We're hopeful that our pre-K facilities will be open by then, and we would bring them on as well, pending the availability of their facilities. In January, right after Christmas break, we would transition just the 7th grade back. We want to give them an opportunity to transition to the middle school. They certainly had an abrupt ending to their elementary experience. We want to bring them back to the middle school, let the middle school get comfortable with having kids back in the classrooms. How are they going to move kids around campus? How is cohorting going to work for them? And give the 7th graders a chance to transition before we bring in the 8th grade students at the semester break. A semester break also gives us a chance to open up with new courses. Certainly we'll have more knowledge around the disease level in our community and what the recommendations are. And that semester break also makes a lot of sense for secondary scheduling. It would be very difficult midstream here to change secondary schedules. So we're proposing that as our accelerated opening dates based on guidance from the Department of Health, based on comment from the board and the community. So those are the dates that we're suggesting and some of the rationale for why we picked those dates. It looks like Jen has a question.
Okay, can you explain the just 7th grade, bringing them back before 8th through 12th, just the background behind that so that we can fully, like, are they the guinea pigs? I guess I should ask.
Yeah.
For
Yeah,
that whole secondary or what?
Right. I hesitate to call them guinea pigs, but they are the primary driver for that rationale was oftentimes middle schools, and I know our middle school has run some activities where they bring those kids on campus without anybody else around. It's a chance where the elementary kids are now coming together as a class. It's their first opportunity to experience a new facility. And we typically do that in a normal school year. We thought this was particularly important because there are some struggles with adolescents at that age. And our system, again, ended abruptly. And now we're going to drop them off at a new campus with new faces, new people, new experience. And we thought it was appropriate to give them some additional time to transition. Now, from the testing perspective, it does give the middle school an opportunity to try strategies and protocols out for moving kids around the campus in a more condensed setting. So it does give them an opportunity to do lessons learned. The elementary will have that because they'll have the K-3 kids on campus first. They learn some lessons, open the 4-6 option. We wanted to give the middle school that opportunity as well. And we felt like those timelines and those transition points seemed most appropriate. The next slide provides another layer of detail around how we would move the plan forward. Certainly, you're going to see that the highest level of detail, that whole idea we talked about earlier around strategy, taking the vision that the board has shared with us and the expectation and drilling down to the small detail level, that has to happen at the school sites. There has to be teacher input. There has to be input from all the employees that are school sites to say, how's it going to work in our building? So we're at October 6th presenting to the board and the community this evening. On October 8th and 9th, there's an opportunity for our teachers at the elementary levels to gather up and talk about and prepare for what may be a phased reopening. Certainly in the next few days, we would sit down with the associations as well and start those kinds of conversations. And then it gives us about 3 weeks for school teams to develop their implementation plans. And again, I think it's important that we remind the community and the board that much of that planning was done at the school site in preparation for a blended opening. And they've learned a lot over the last several weeks about how to communicate with families, how to bring kids in, how to do things safely. So we're fully confident that they'll be in a position to put those plans into action. We would anticipate coming back on October 26th to let the board know, here's where we're at with staffing and student FTE, and we're ready to go. On November 2nd and 3rd, there's already pre-scheduled parent conferences. So like we did with the soft start at the beginning of the online experience, we would structure it in a very similar format, bring parents in, get them up to speed on the expectations and how we're going to handle in-person learning. And then we get it rolling on November 4th. The timelines and the activities would probably be mirrored in the next several cells, but it's all tentative based on what happens K-3 and how things roll out. So we just wanted to let you know that there is a level of detail. There's a lot of work happening at the school level, and there's a lot to be done in finalizing planning around it. But we thought it was important that the board understand that we're positioned and ready to move forward with considering an accelerated opening. The next slide is going to provide some clarity. And again, these are callbacks to what we discussed in the summertime around the health and safety protocols for a blended face-to-face instruction. We were focusing at that point around universal health guidelines, washing hands, wearing a mask, social distancing, all those kinds of factors. So we want to share with the board some updates from the Department of Health. The next slide provides some clarity from the Department of Health. Talia, if we can move to the next slide. It talks about community rates over 200 per 100,000 per 14 days. That's new guidance from the CDC and Departments of Health. They have learned some lessons across the country about what is an appropriate level and how can we get students back onto campus. And they continue to recommend in-person learning for at-risk students and expanding for those who are struggling with distance learning. And we're, again, learning lessons. And the reason we picked the K-3 folks are they have shared that they're struggling with in-person learning. And also access in our community. I think many folks in our district have done an excellent job of expanding internet access to many of our students, but there are still families who struggle with reliable internet. Submit our plan to the Department of Health based on this guidance and based on what's happening regionally around us. We fully expect that they would approve our plan. The Department of Health also recommends that we continue to keep classes small in well-defined cohorts, and that's the rationale for not moving more aggressively 9-12. Cohorting is very difficult at that level based on credit accrual and student need. Whatever we do when we come back is certainly going to enforce social distancing measures, counting students and square footage and making sure every student has 36 square feet available, and monitoring those cohorts. They continue to have a preferred number of students being 5, but the language that they're using around preference and recommendation continues to provide more flexibility for school districts. The last piece that I think it's important that the community hears and that the Department of Health was very clear about is this idea about enforcing a policy and adherence to the correct use of face coverings. Face coverings will be a requirement for students. Certainly there are rare instances where a student may have a medical need not to, that they can't use a mask or a face covering. Those all have to be approved by the Department of Health with a recommendation from a primary care provider. So those should be very few and far between. And people need to understand that if they come onto our campuses as an employee or as a student, they will be required to wear a mask. Questions about the updated guidance from the Department of Health? The next slide provides a level of detail around the health and safety of students and staff, particularly around school and classroom cleanliness. Certainly, we have protocols and plans in place for getting in there frequently and cleaning the commonly touched high-touch areas, and we'll be cleaning in between cohorts. Principals have been working with their teams to design those practices and preparing for that. Regarding social distancing, we're going to continue to cohort students and limit the contact between students. We're required to set up directional arrows. It's perhaps for those of you that have been in public spaces recently, that's now a more common experience. We're going to try and use exterior doors, set up the classrooms in such a way, limit sustained contact. And certainly we would continue to not have large school activities or common spaces where we're sharing meals. So some rehash from the Department of Health, but I think it's important that we remind folks, this is what we talked about in the summertime for the blended option. And this is what you need to know about what the experience will be like when the students show up. The next slide is a final piece around health and safety. Certainly personal protective equipment is a term that we've all become very familiar with over the last 6 or 8 months. And it's important that we reiterate students and staff will be required to wear masks to be on our campus and to participate in in-person learning. Additionally, we're going to require students and staff to complete an attestation form regarding if they have symptoms, if they've been around folks who have tested positive, so that we keep track. We're required to keep track of that sort of data. Additionally, students who exhibit COVID symptoms will be sent home. There is really clear guidance from the Department of Health. There's a clear flow chart that they've developed that's really, I think, user-friendly, and we'll be sharing that with families, with the broader community, and with our administrators at the school sites. Certainly, we have some expertise in our health department with Abby Homus and her staff. She's well-versed in what the Department of Health is recommending and suggesting. So it's important that what we're hearing from other school sites is there are some families who are school districts that are allowing in-person instruction now. There have been some struggles in making sure those attestation forms get filled out every day. But that's going to be a non-negotiable for us. We want people to really pay attention to how they're feeling and to come to school if they're safe. And so those protocols will be new for people, but it's important that they understand a requirement of this blended in-person model is that there's going to be some lift on the side of the family and the student as well to make sure that they give us the important information we need to feel like folks are safe. Any questions about health and safety protocol for students and staff?
Pete, we'll still
So, sorry, Ken, you go first.
yeah, we'll still temperatures still be taking at the door before students come in and stuff like that, even though if they fill out their form in the morning and say they didn't have a fever or anything, because I know some parents don't have the access to take a temperature. So they'll just check the form that no, but are we still going to do some of that stuff?
Yeah, so my understanding is there's been an adjustment in the what the Department of Health and the CDC recommend around that. That doesn't mean we couldn't determine as a system that we want to put that layer in for us. So if we have the equipment, we have the staff, we have the protocols, what we have heard from the Department of Health, Ken, in that area is every layer that you can put in place, you should consider. And so if that's an additional layer that we are prepared to put in place, then we should consider it and we should offer it. But the guidance has been adjusted around that. The primary driver is the attestation form and folks saying that they feel safe and feel comfortable. But again, I think it gets back to we want all of our stakeholders to feel that. And if that means at the site level, we want to consider taking temps, then we could do that.
I had a clarifying question around sent home. If they exhibit some of the symptoms, they're sent home. Can you explain how long, or they have to be at home until they're a negative, or those kinds of details? At what point do we request tests, and at what point do we just say you just have to wait it out? I guess that's my question.
Yeah, the Department of Health has been really clear about that, Jen. I don't have that document in front of me, but it's certainly something that it sounds like if there are questions in the community about that, I can speak with Dr. Hurst around putting that kind of resource on our website so folks could see it. I think we can make that happen for sure. But really, as I think back to the guidance that was listed there, it's if you have, I think they're calling them specific symptoms now. There are these general symptoms that folks said, well, that could be most anyone could have some of those symptoms, but there are more specific ones. So they've got it down to the level of what symptoms do you have? How long have you had them? Have you been around someone? And so it's a series of yes or no questions that direct you down the flow chart. Now, if you're someone that we should be concerned about, certainly getting a test and quarantining is going to be a requirement if you want to come back in a certain time frame. But there are other parameters now around the specificity of the symptoms that allow you to say, well, if you've been fever-free 24 hours without medication, some of those other factors, that area of expertise, I would leave to our health director, Abby Hilmas, and to Greg Foltz, our safety director. But being sent home means we went through the flow chart. Someone at our school site said, you're in this category, you have to go home. But we will be very clear with people about what that is and get that information out so that they understand what their experience will be like. The next slide then takes us back to the timeline. I just, again, wanted to remind the board about what we're recommending and moving forward with this option based on, again, feedback from the community, feedback from the board, and the rate of decline of virus spread in our community. The next slide just is, again, provides a callback for the board around where we're at with our recommendation. I think it's really important that the board and the community understand that moving forward, it's going to be a really require collaborative conversation and planning between PSC, OEA, and OSD. And based on the recommendation tonight from the board, that will frame those conversations that we'll have over the next few days in preparation for a return to in-person learning whenever that may be. And the last slide just provides an opportunity for either questions, comments, or observation, and what we're hoping is a response from the board about where we're headed as a system.
All right. Well, I want to first off thank you very much for that great presentation, Pete. That again, I know it takes a village. I know you got a team. The district has a team that surrounds you and everybody involved, but I know that you've been spearheading a lot of the conversation. I want to personally thank you for that. Everybody involved in putting this together. I appreciate the time to the attention to detail. You all were tasked with a plan that was inclusive, a plan that looked at all possible options, positive, negative things that could come from this. And I think you all have done a great job with this presentation. So I wanted to thank you for that. I want to now ask my fellow board members for their comments, observations, before we go into a discussion of a potential next step. So I would ask any one of my board members to chime in and give us any feedback that they would like to share tonight.
I'll go first, Mike. I just wanted to say to the district and to everybody who's put so much work into this, thank you so much. I know this is not an easy task. It's not easy to come up with the ideas. It's not easy to implement them. We're in a business of not easy, that's for sure. And you guys have really, really shined. And I just want you to know how much I appreciate it and recognize the hard work that you've put in. And Pete and Dr. Hurst, your leadership has been really exemplified this last week and a half in leading your team to get this presentation put together. I think it all looks really great. I'm really happy with the timeline that you put forward. If it came across that I was wanting you to have a plan to put kids in school tomorrow, I apologize. I was looking for a plan forward in previous board meetings, and you guys delivered, and you did it in a really great job. So I just want to say thank you. And I think that what you've put together tonight looks really great and is positive and great for our community and for our kids, and is moving in the right direction. So I just want to say thank you, and I think you've done great.
And by the way, bit of never won this thing all goes away.
Go ahead, Ken.
Okay, I'm just appreciative too of all the time that's been put into this. It come a lot quicker than what I anticipated, and I really appreciate that because it cuts down on that final time and how quick we can get our kids back into the classroom. I really appreciate the accelerated plan because we could reach those kids that need it the most, that younger age group. And I like that approach to it. It's a good approach by getting the younger group started, testing the water, see how everything goes. I really appreciate that. The district has did a lot of work in this, but it's also going to come down to a lot of work by the parents in order to make this work. They're the ones that send the kids off in the morning. They're going to have to be very diligent on checking their kids, making sure they don't have any symptoms, because the last thing we want to do is get going on this and have to shut it down. So I'm just going to try to encourage all the parents out there right now that if you want to keep your kids in school and keep them coming to school, really help us follow the guidelines that we need to follow to keep them in there. We don't want this to be spread through the schools or brought into the schools. So that's where I can make a little encouragement to the parents. Please help us with this. We've been trying to get this because a lot of parents have been coming to us and wanting their kids back in, and we're doing our part. We're going to ask you to help do your part to make this work too.
Ken, I think that you've said some very important things, that it's a whole group thing. I definitely agree that it is going to be different than school in the past, but that and I know our numbers have been decreasing, and I pray they continue to decrease. And I know over the summer there was a lot of things about no school is an island, and but there are ways to keep it much lower and to not spread. And I pray that really truly does work. I never at any time, I think, did any of us ever say that online is the best. Just in classroom has always been the best option. But we just didn't feel like we could do it yet. And I hope that our numbers keep decreasing so that we can continue to move forward. This accelerated sounds great. And to really work through all of the details as a group, and to be unified with trying to go back at a safe stage for everyone. I think that this is definitely a doable thing. There are still going to be hurdles. There are still going to be challenges. There will still be potentially cohorts that have to be shut down for short periods of time or things like that. But I think that this plan that is amazing, came way faster than we ever thought, is much more well thought out and well planned than when they called and said, we're ready for Tuesday. I thought, oh, I don't think you are, but it's a great plan. And I would like to praise the district for their work so far, and the unions for being able to ask the questions and get them back as fast as they did, so that there's no issues with whatever. I think that we're moving forward and that we've been given a great option in a way to move forward.
I don't think that I really have much more to say than the other board members, and no need to repeat. This is a community effort for everyone, and I think the plan is really good. And I think it gives us timeline to everyone to be ready to make the start. So let's hope our numbers go down in November 1st or 2nd, 3rd, and 4th. Thank you.
All right. Well, I am very appreciative of everybody's input tonight. Ken, you hit it on the nail. I just want to go back to, I think it was the second slide in the presentation, Pete, and I wanted your outline and outcomes for tonight. And I know we've said it, but I think it merits public announcement of what has transpired. The board comes to the district with a request. A tough decision was made, but the board decides that we request a plan. And the assumption by some folks might have been that the district was not prepared. That is not correct. The district team that spent most of the summer on the daily, I mean, I drive by the district a lot, and the cars were there. So the plans were put in place. As you alluded to, we talked a lot about the blended model until our numbers went where they went, and it was impossible to even think of that being the return model. Thus, we went to the online only, and there again, your team showed the resiliency that they have. Every employee at OSD. I mean, I almost feel like people feel left out, and that is not the intention. Every single one, everybody employed at OSD, you're important, you're awesome, and you're part of this plan, whether you believe it or not, in some way, shape, or form. You guys took the current state, our current reality, the numbers, where they're at, where they're going, stuff going on around us, stuff going on, not just within a 100-mile radius, but nationwide. You guys are cognizant, aware, as we all are, has been mentioned by a couple of directors, of the relevant challenges that are still before us. But understanding that our kids need in-person instruction, waiting or trying to find a way where we did it, where our numbers, thank God right now, are trending in the right way. Might have been a hesitancy on some people's decision-making to where we are today. You all have presented an excellent plan, in my opinion, one that is inclusive to the community, to our employees that perhaps feel hesitancy. We hear you. We hear you. Rest assured that we are trying to do, everybody involved is trying to do what's best for everybody that's involved. And some of the challenges will have to be resolved going forward. And we're cognizant of that. We're aware of that. But I am very, very appreciative once again. I think this is a plan that has specific timelines, specific dates, reasons for the dates, and everything else. So board, what I would like to request at this time is a motion to let the district go ahead with this reopening plan as it's been presented tonight.
Mike, I would like to put forward a motion that we move forward with the district's plan that they brought forward tonight.
I'll
Okay,
second it.
there's been a motion made by Director Prowse to give the district the go ahead to continue with the reopening plan as presented tonight. It's been seconded by Director. Oh my God, Sharon! Why did I forget your?
Sharon,
Judy.
you said it.
Shooty. I'm sorry, Sharon. By Director Shooty. Any discussion?
I would just like to clarify that we are approving the accelerated blending plan,
Yes,
correct?
correct. All in favor? Aye. Aye.
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Motion carries 5-0. Once again, everybody who's on here, who's listened tonight, community of Othello, we have shown through this that we are a resilient bunch. Employees at OSD, we have shown that you guys are up to the challenge. Some of you face challenges that are different than mine are, or other people in this community are yet. There's sacrifice that it'll entail sacrifice perhaps, and everybody's been willing to step up to the plate to do this. So I just want to finish tonight by thanking each and every one of our community members that participated in the surveys, those that have given your feedback to board members individually. I want to thank all the administrators of this district. The work you're doing at your buildings, it doesn't go unnoticed. Thank you very much. Chris, the entire district staff, once again, great job, great presentation. And let's continue this collaborative movement. Let's continue going forward and doing what's best for the kids in Othello. Let's remember that if we keep the end goal in mind, guys, we will do the right things. We will get through these difficult times. And as I tell my family member, my personal family, I said, you know what, guys, we're one step closer to beating this thing in community of Othello. Let's stay strong. Let's stay resilient, and let's get our kids back to school in a safe way to where hopefully we can make up some of the time lost. Thank you very much, everyone who has listened tonight. Having said that, this meeting is adjourned. Thank you very much.